All right, everyone. It's Wednesday, October 9, 5 p.m., and the Budget and Finance Procurement Process Working Group meeting is now called to order. I've got, we don't need quorum for this one, but I've got Councilmember Evans and Councilmember Webb. Thank you both for making the time. Councilmember Quinn Evans-Sigel has a family thing, and so she said she wouldn't be able to make it. So we're going to make it very easy, what we want to do. So we've got folks from Procurement with us, formerly Procurement and currently Procurement. Zach, I owe you an apology. We discussed having Procurement do a presentation in the beginning, and then we changed it that your presentation will be in the end. So last meeting when we met, as a recap for you, I thought it's always better that we interview the people first, find out what the issues are, and then let Procurement come and do their presentation. That way they can address whatever issue people said they're facing, so we can see if what they have is adequate or not. And so we were going to do the invitation, but as I was talking to Mary Jo afterwards, one of the things that we decided to do for the sake of council members as well as viewing audience is that we thought we cannot start talking about procurement without doing like an overview, so people have an idea of what are we talking about, what are we trying to look. And so with that, finance and procurement is been good enough. So we want to go over, just give us a general overview about the procurement process so that at least everybody knows what it is that we're trying to look into. And if you will introduce yourself, do you want to sit where we can see you? So
that would be great, actually.
Yes, so you could, I think this would be better. We've got Miss Michelle Lynn, the former purchasing agent, also with us, so thank you for joining. And of course, Miss Darby, to set us straight. So make sure that I'm on track. All right, Zach, if you will introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Zach Kelly. I am the Special Assistant for Innovation and Strategy in the Division of Purchases, which is inside of the Department of Finance. And I want to apologize on the front end for my new boss, not former boss, being here. Dennis Rowland, the purchasing agent. Dennis recently experienced a loss in his family, a very close individual. His mother passed away, and he is on a pre-planned trip on the heels of that. So he would normally be here, but he's out, and so in his absence, I will attempt to try to explain to you what we do without either confusing you or giving you something that's just patently wrong piece of information. So I do want to note that to what you said, that we have prepared a longer a presentation, more in-depth presentation, and we hope to be able to give that at some point. If not, I'm going to talk about an opportunity at the end where we're giving that presentation to departments, and that will be a publicly noticed meeting, so members of this committee and council will of course be welcome to attend, and I'll provide those links to the chairperson and to Director Darby. So, given our limited time today, I want to go over just a couple of three things. I want to talk about what we do, how we do it, and what our workload looks like. And then I'm just going to sit back and let you all ask me some questions that if I can't answer, I'm sure that Michelle can. First, what we do. The Division of Purchases, very simply, we buy goods and secure services on behalf of the 50-plus departments and agencies that make up the metropolitan government of Nashville and Davidson County. I know that that's what we do because that's what it says on our website, and I wrote it. So I feel fairly confident in that. What I hope you'll take from that is that we are not an external services provider. We don't pave your roads, we don't run your after-school programs, thankfully we don't clean your water, but we do get our partners across government, the NDOTs, the MACs, the MWSs, the resources that they need to provide those essential services to our community. And how do we do that? We do that by building partnerships with the private sector that operate for the public good. I like to tell people that this idea of public-private partnerships became very in vogue in the last couple of years, but really, if you work in procurement, we're kind of the OGs of public-private partnerships. We know that government can't do everything. We, for instance, we don't own an asphalt plant or a concrete pit, and so we can't pave our roads, we can't build our sidewalks. We have to rely on our partners in the private sector to do that. And so our job in procurement is to take what the departments need and help them build a relationship with the supplier in the private sector to deliver on a public good. So the second thing would be, how do we do that? And the answer to that question is we do it very carefully. We are one of, if not the most highly regulated part of government. We're regulated by state law and the General Assembly. We're regulated by the Metro Code and our friends on the council. We're regulated by the procurement regulations and the Procurement Standards Board, the Model Procurement Code and the American Bar Association, and the National Institute of Government Purchases. The work that we do is not only highly regulated, it's also highly integrated. Everything that we do is a partnership between us and the department, Metro Legal, ITS, budgets, the finance director, the administration, and certainly this council. And so when people tell you, and I'm sure that you will hear this, that purchasing takes a long time, you should believe them. They are absolutely correct. What I hope that you will understand is just how little of that time is often under our control. Finally, I want to give you just a general idea of what our workload looks like. Like I said, we buy on behalf of 50 departments and agencies. Our combined spend on goods and services every year is around $2 billion, which is larger than, or as large as some of the smaller states in the union. On average, our buyers have 19 active projects at any one given time. That's not over the course of a year, that's at any given point in time. They're working on 19 purchases. And for context, last year we had the Harvard Kennedy School in to study the workloads that our buyers have. And according to their numbers, the maximum number of projects that any buyer can handle at one time is around 13. Which means that currently our buyers are managing 6 more projects than what a person can reasonably be expected to manage. I'd also point out the city, we just came back from the National Institute of Government Purchases Conference, and we were meeting there with the city of Houston. Houston, obviously a much bigger city, but their government functions are not consolidated like ours. So they spend about $2 billion a year on the functions that they buy for. The only difference between their department and our department is that they have 75 staff members working on $2 billion of spend. We have 26. So again, when people tell you that procurement takes a long time, they are correct. And this is one of those contributing factors. I don't want to, first of all, as a department, I would be remiss if I didn't come up here and pour mouth a little bit, right? Like, that's what we do. But I would be remiss if I didn't, note that it's not all bad news and doom and gloom. We have a lot of things in Metro Procurement that actually work in our advantage. And one of those things is that we have a centralized procurement system. And all that means is that anything above $25,000 comes to us, and we help the departments effectuate those purchases. Anything below $25,000, they can make those purchases themselves under the guidelines that we set out. And I have to tell you that, having just come back from the NIGB conference, and I've talked to Councilmember Warren, I've talked about this, one of the things that people are always jealous of is that we have such a centralized system, because it has a number of advantages. It reduces our risk. With a centralized procurement system, you don't have 50 departments and agencies kind of going out and doing their own thing. You have one centralized group of professionals who know the law, know the regulations, know the market, and know how to get you into a contract that meets your needs. And not for nothing, but we also know how to make sure that you don't end up on the business end of a Phil Williams special, which is particularly important to people. It also leverages scale. When we have 50-plus departments and agencies, if they're all out buying for themselves, you don't get to take advantage of bundling and scale. By coming through a central procurement office, we're able to combine solicitations, we're able to combine contracts, we're able to leverage that $2 billion of spend, which is a huge amount of spend, to reduce the cost and reduce the administrative burden of doing business across the board. And finally, believe it or not, it really does save you. It really does save you time. In a centralized system like we have, if water needs to repair a sidewalk and NDOT wants to build a new one, in a decentralized system, there's no coordination between those two. In a centralized system like we have, we're able to bundle contracts, we're able to communicate and coordinate, and we're able to work together to reduce the lead time for those departments. It's almost a daily occurrence that we have a request from a department that says, hey, I need this thing, or they'll submit a requisition for one thing or the other, and we're able to send it back to them and say, actually, we don't have to go out to bid on that because we already have a contract that you can use for that. It is impossible for me to tell you in a short period of time all of the things that we do. And so I hope, again, that at some point we'll be able to give that more in-depth presentation, or that you'll join us on the 7th. But I've tried to give you a very brief overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have or provide more information or color there.
Thank you.
Thank you. On the when you're talking about, I guess, the number of agents and buyers that you have, how are they organized? Are they organized by the type of purchase that's being made, by department? Can you speak to any of that?
Had I planted that question, I couldn't have asked for that, which I did not. But so one of the, and Councilmember Suarez has been through this presentation with the purchasing agent. In the past, we've assigned by workload. So something would come in, and you would assign it based on where your workload is. And there was a good reason for the way that we did that. We did that because some departments spend at different times of year. You're not going to be paving a road in the dead of winter, so you're going to have those solicitations come in at a different time. When Dennis Rowland came in as purchasing agent, he restructured the way that our buyers buy, and now they're assigned by department. And one of the reasons that he did that is because he wanted to reduce the kind of learning curve that buyers have when it comes to these procurements coming in. So now you have a buyer who's working with NDOT, who's working with water, who's working with these major department, or not in major department, any of the departments. And that way they're able to learn that department, they're able to kind of learn the individuals there and build those relationships, so that the idea being that it will reduce that lead time between when we receive a requisition, which is the document they use to tell us what they need, to go from a requisition to a solicitation, which is the document we use to tell the market what we're looking to buy.
I've got a whole list. I can keep going, unless you want to rotate.
Go ahead.
Okay, so can you speak to, and I know we're going to get to like the documents that are in front of us, and maybe that's.
Don't jump to that.
I'm just asking the question, so maybe it's something for the end presentation that we can hear about. Is kind of when you're talking about, I guess, as far as going through that requisition to like whatever the end product is, whether it's a piece of equipment or whatever the outcome is supposed to be. At what point is it that item like flagged if there's a problem? Like, and I'll use a specific example, like animal control has said that there's liners, that they need for their trucks or vehicles or whatever, and it's kind of, those liners are preventing them from like bringing like vehicles online for their employees. So at what point in the process do we look at, like, is the vendor able to provide like what we're buying? And is that something that would be flagged by the department that would be making that purchase? Or does it come through in a different way to go, hey, we've got a red flag on whatever the product is?
So are we talking about, in this situation, are we talking about a item that's already under contract, or are we talking about somebody comes to me and says, I need liners for my truck?
It has sounded like, and Jennifer, I know, has been part of these conversations too, that it sounds like it's something that's already under contract. Like, we have vehicles.
Got it, yes.
It's like a phase thing. Like, we've got these vehicles. They're here.
I'm
We don't
fairly
have these liners. And so they can't like get it to the end where I'm assigning it to Councilmember Zulfat as a an employee.
So let me answer what I know about that situation and then answer in the abstract
Okay.
on that. So my best, and this is limited knowledge, but I know that we have a sole source in place to retrofit. It's essentially an upfit for those Mack vehicles. And the department, in that specific instance, the department came to us and said there's only one source for this. We vetted it, we granted them their sole source, and this is who they wanted.
Got it.
And my understanding is that there has since then been a problem with delivery of that. I will say anecdotally that this is one of the reasons that we really, as purchasing professionals, dislike sole sources. And try our very best, although it may seem like you've seen a lot of them, we try our very best. That I vet all of them, and if you ask most of the departments, I'm sure that I'm not their favorite person because my name goes on that vetting document. And we try very hard to reject those, and this is one of those reasons. In this instance, we are trying to help them resolve this with the vendor, because the first thing to understand is that after items are under contract, so once it's gone out to bid, we've helped them develop the contract, everybody signed it, it's been approved, those items go to the Department for Contract Administration. We don't do that. The first thing that they need to do if there's an issue is that whoever's the administrator of that contract in the department will try to resolve that with the vendor. If they can't, then at that point we do invite them to come back to us and rely on our expertise to do that. And we will help them work through a process which usually involves something called a cure plan, where we say, hey, you're not doing this thing that you told us you would do. We need you to do this thing. How are you going to do this thing? And let's agree to how we're going to do that. We also went through a cohort at Harvard last year to help develop a more robust contract administration plan and try to support departments, but that is a departmental function. And that's what's happened in that instance, is we're trying to help resolve that. But it is also, we do try to use it as a teaching moment to say, hey, this is why we don't like to do sole sources, because if you go out in the market, when we're doing a sole source, I'm taking the department's word on that along with my market research. When we go out and compete it in the market, they're competing against each other, and so they have to go and demonstrate to us that they can do the business, and so it's less likely that we're going to end up in that situation on the
Makes
back
sense, thank you.
Ms. Michelle.
Can I add something to that?
Sure, why not?
Yeah. And the only thing that I would add to that particular situation is that I think that the department did a really good job of being a contract administrator in that instance, because the pricing that was coming in on that contract, on the invoice, was different from what was actually in the contract. And that's what we want departments to do, is to engage in that contract compliance work. And the reason there was a difference is because the vendor, kind of as Zach is saying, they know they're the sole source and they wanted to increase that pricing. And post-COVID, we saw a lot of that. A lot of our vendors encountered problems, and so we worked with them to identify some mechanisms to allow for what we call temporary relief, but we required them to provide us with documentation to support it, so that we weren't just kind of like giving away the farm, and we were really unsuccessful in getting that documentation from that vendor. So we didn't feel justified in moving the price in the contract. So, and it did result in some of those issues that Zach talked about with sole sourcing.
Okay.
So my question is, now that it's back up for rebid, since we're talking about that one, it's being rebidded out.
It wasn't bid in the first place, it was a sole source.
So now it's being rebid out. So if it's a sole source, did we find other sources?
So, I don't want us to go in every and all directions, okay? There's got to be some logic to this madness. And so what I would like to do is, I don't want us to go into animal care question now.
Okay.
If we decide we want to bring animal care department as one of the people we want to interview, we'll bring them. They can talk about what they've run into, and we have somebody. And when we make the schedule of the department we're talking into, we will have the buyer and whoever works with them present, and they can answer our question. Does that make sense? So I want us to do this because procurement is not just this one or one department. We have to look at everything holistically. So if it's okay with you all, this is supposed to be like an overview. Let's get into it, and then we now start getting into those issues, and when we start having them, procurement will be here to answer them, and then procurement will come back again to do. So if you all will be patient, I know that we have a lot of questions. That's why we're here. Trust me, I waited 5 years for this. No, I always talk to Miss Michelle and Zach all the time, so they know me. So that's what I would like to do. But if there's something urgent that the department needs help with, you can send them an email, and that would be fine. So any other question that is non-specific at this point?
And if I could just offer, we can also, we routinely meet with council members, and so if you have we met with Councilmember Vo a few weeks ago about the Sunnyside Mansion process that's going on there. So if you have some particular issues you're concerned about, feel free to reach out to me. We'll put a time on schedule. You can come to our little tiny office in Lindsley Hall, or we can meet virtually, and we're happy to walk you through and give you an update on those things. That's not a problem.
And I do want those conversations to happen here, because I think that if it happens off-site, we may not get all of it together. So we might make Adima Care the first one that we talk to.
Right.
If this is a pressing one and we need to resolve it quickly, we can do that. Unless it's something that has to be like in the next week or so. But if it's not, I think then let's do that and get all of that together. So any other?
I have other generic questions.
Okay, let's
I mean, I
ask.
can express them, and then if they're not appropriate for now, if they need to be held till at the very end, like when we get the full follow-up conversation. So I guess to understand more kind of the difference between like a speaker, like I'm gonna have a speaker in my department and the requirements for those folks versus like a piece of equipment or a thing or something like that. So that's one question. Questions about,
That's a process.
right,
That's a process question. So you
I can answer that very
you can
quickly.
answer that.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I'll keep it
that's
general
okay.
so that
Yeah.
you-
Okay.
Yeah, I can answer that.
So for speakers, this is something that we updated. A speaker is a sole source.
Okay.
Basically, so departments, we changed the regulations maybe 2 weeks ago. Speakers have always been a sole source because you can't, if you need a speaker to come, you can't, that's not a thing that you're gonna bid out, right? But we've changed the regulations now to where if libraries, for instance, needed to have a speaker come in, then they could go and hire that speaker. They wouldn't have to come through us to do that. That's a sole source that
okay.
they can do. That's an item
Okay.
that's pre-approved by the regulations. And we didn't make that change. The Procurement Standards Board made that change.
Oh, okay.
We don't just change our rules willy-nilly.
And so, what if it's over 25,000? And I don't know what speaker we.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what speaker's over 25,000?
If you know who it is, I'd like to know that. So that I could go speak about that. It's definitely not procurement or government. So if it were over 25,000, it would still be, because that category of sole
It's
sourcing
now, okay.
is approved. And that's never been, if it's an item that's pre-approved by the Procurement Standards Board for sole sourcing, that's not dependent on the
amount.
The amount.
Okay, and then, oh, go ahead.
Well, how many exceptions to that rule is there? Because earlier you said it was, so if the speakers is an exception, is that the only exception?
I wouldn't call them, I wouldn't.
Exceptions, not call them exceptions?
Except Michelle and I, when she was purchasing agent, used to argue that Michelle was too wrapped up in semantics sometimes, and now I find myself being in the same position. I wouldn't call it an exception, so to speak. But there are effectively, let me just do some quick math. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are effectively maybe 10, and just to give you an idea of what they are, goods and services provided directly by departments and agencies of the metro government. If I want to go use the parks facility and I work for NDOT, I don't have to source that. I can just go. That's pre-approved. TVA, so if it's NES, if it's power, there are no other power sources in the Tennessee Valley because they have a monopoly. So that's an item that's approved for sole source. Gas or water utilities, transportation of prisoners or witnesses, and that's because you don't want to bid that kind of thing out. And tell them who's doing the transport. Placement of formal or legal notices, again, that's not something we would bid out, so that's pre-approved. Placement of advertisements, it's if you need to advertise on WSMV for the fair, that's one thing that we've had a request for in the past. That shouldn't have to come through us. That's an unnecessary administrative burden. That should be able to be done by them. Subscriptions to print or online newspapers, periodicals, subscriptions to literary databases. That's one that we added after working with libraries for a couple of years because obviously there are only so many of those. memberships, registration, tuition, rental of space, or provision of food, beverages, speakers for Metro-sanctioned events, and then any freight or express or trucking charges that aren't included as part of your purchase. Because you don't get to source those. Whoever you're buying it for, it sources those. So those are your only categories that are not included.
I guess another generic question on the, when it's equipment purchases, if a department has a piece of equipment and another department wants the exact same piece of equipment, is that considered, like, do you look at, like, we originally bought, and these were the parameters, and this was the pricing and all that stuff? Or do you have to go back out and go through the whole process again and, like, look outside of?
Yeah. It would depend, and I hate that answer, but it would. So let me give you 2 examples. So let's say that, NDOT, I know this is not a real thing, but let's just pretend that it is. NDOT has a sidewalk building machine that builds sidewalks. And Water says, okay, well, we need to build some sidewalks too, because we just had to rip them up and put sewer, water, whatever under there. And it would be helpful for us to have the same machine because we're taking hunks of their sidewalk out, and it needs to be the same thing. So in order for it to be compatible, then we need to have the same machine. One of 2 things would have probably happen. Number one, we probably have that on contract. And if we do have that on contract, it's as simple as the department issuing a purchase order against the contract, whether it's theirs or whether it's another department's, because again, that's an advantage of central purchasing. You can buy off of any of our contracts. So 90% of the time, we're gonna have a contract to get you that thing. Let's say we don't. Let's say we have a situation where that contract has expired. Second option would be for them to come to us and say, hey, this is a sole source because I'm tearing up their sidewalk. I need to build it back exactly the same. So I need the same Sidewalk-O-Matic 3000 that they have. And we would review that. We would say compatibility matters. It's a sole source. We would go out and negotiate that contract. The other thing that happens though is we do have to look and see, is it really an issue of compatibility, or could any machine any sidewalk building machine actually do that? And that's what we would evaluate in that situation, because if all sidewalk machines are equal and all sidewalk machines could build the same sidewalk, then that wouldn't be a sole source, and we would have to put that out to bid, because we can't just arbitrarily award a contract. We have to have some sourcing base in order to do that.
Thank you.
I have a question. What's the longest length of a contract?
The maximum, again, if I could plan a question, I would have planted that one. The maximum length of a contract for Metro, so our standard contract term is 60 months or 5 years. Anything beyond that requires us to go to council. And I will just tell you that departments they don't love you all, but it's just, it's not a thing that they, you only do it if you need to. We also do not like contracts that go beyond that, because your market changes, especially in modern times. You have businesses come, businesses go. Generally, things are always more competitive 5 years from now than they are, so we don't like to go beyond that term. But sometimes, if it is something where you're asking the vendor to invest capital, like biosolids or something like that, where you're asking them to make an actual capital investment, you may have to extend that length of contract in order to, have a price that's reasonable for you. But generally 60 months.
Yeah, I thought that was a long term, like for a business to want to go into a contract.
Well, it does. So the reason that we do the 60 months is because it does allow. It helps us hold. It helps us hold pricing. And also because it takes anywhere from 120 days to a year to get into contract. And so when you take that long to bid it out and to get into a contract, and because so many, and this is one of the things that I go into in my longer presentation,
People are mad.
is, I think this is one of the reasons that I would love to go through all of the steps.
you will.
And I will, yes, thank you. All the steps of that process, because there are it's not like we are buying for Nissan North America or a private entity. When you're buying for the public sector, when you're buying with public dollars, there are so many rules that we have to follow, and we also have to build a process that inspires public confidence in it. And that's one of the reasons that it takes long. And when it takes that long, then you want some breathing room afterwards to be under the contract.
May I add one thing? I would just say that, am I good?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay. 60 months is the most that the purchasing agent is authorized to enter into a contract, but there are a number of instances where the purchasing agent develops a contract that's consistent with the need for whatever it is that's being procured. And I think that's important to note, because one of the things that procurement is responsible for is ensuring that there are active certificates of insurance on file at all times during the life of a contract. So if you have a contract that's for 60 months, but in all actuality, all you needed was, 3 years, not 5, one of two things is gonna happen. You're either gonna require a vendor to continue to pay for a certificate of insurance for a period that you really don't need that contract, or you're gonna be out of compliance with the requirements that are set forth. So I think that it's important to note that 60 months is the maximum, but there's thought given to exactly what that contract period should be given what's being procured.
All righty. Any more general questions?
I've got more, but we'll keep going.
You can ask them. I mean, you can. And if it's not generic,
Okay.
we'll let you know it's not
So
generic.
the other one I think may be relevant, like kind of going back to, because usually things rise to us when departments feel like they have an issue. And that's when we normally hear about procurement, like things are hung up in procurement. So if you go back, would you be able to drill down with how you operate and say, like, these are the 30 longest contracts or whatever that have taken, like, kind of using Mac as just an example. I'm not going to talk about Mac, but like using them as an example, like who have you gotten the ball started with and it's transitioned out to administration on the department side, but they still don't have whatever their thing is. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if you could tell that by the time it gets to the department, unless they're coming back to you and then saying there's a problem.
Unless they come back to, because we are not charged with contract administration, it only comes to us. Now, we encourage departments to bring it to us before there is a problem.
Okay.
Because we can help, a lot of times we do have enough expertise that we can help them resolve that problem. I will tell you that the problems that we can't resolve are the ones that have already gotten off the tracks by the time they get back to us. Most of the time, departments are able to, and most of the departments are very good about this. We had an issue with juvenile court and drug testing a couple years ago, and juvenile court was great about coming back to us and saying, hey, this is what we contracted for. Here are all of the documented things that they have not done, and we don't know how to resolve this anymore. Because if you come to us without documentation, when we go to legal to try to take some recourse on it, legal is going to come back to us and say, you don't have any documentation, I don't know what you want me to do with that. And our hands are kind of tied. But when departments are able to document, try to resolve it themselves, and then come back to us, we can usually help them resolve it. But we have we have 27 people. We can't, we don't know about it unless they bring it back to us.
And so if they're coming to us, we need to redirect them back to your department, and they need to go back to the officer that they were working with?
If you direct them back to myself or the purchasing agent, we'll get them where they need to go.
Okay.
Because generally they would not go back to that buyer. Bless their hearts. Like, once those buyers are done, they're crossing that off their list about that, and they're a repository of information, but that their specialist is in their name. They're specialized in buying, developing contracts.
Okay.
We do have another team of people in the business assistance office and our business development officer and the purchasing agent who are charged with resolving those issues, and they'll probably consult with that buyer, but it would be handled. That would be an escalation, so it would be handled at the management level. But if you send them back to us, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then, I'm sorry, last question.
Okay, I'm
sorry.
thinking about that. I'll let you know.
We could just go have coffee if you wanted to.
I think she's been waiting for you. I'm glad we're doing it at the front end. I would do a managing for
Our
it.
contract, our contracts, I guess, are they written on, are they Metro contracts? Like, are we providing the template to these providers and vendors, and then they are, going through that process with us? Or are we taking vendor contracts and then modifying for our
No, we would never do
specifications?
that. So the way that we have Metro has a standard contract.
Okay.
And just two brief notes. Now, if you're granted a sole source, then you can't take an exception to the Metro contract. That's one thing that we've done recently is said, like, if you want to be a sole source, then you don't get to take any exceptions to the Metro contract. If you do take exceptions, then we send it out to the market and, go with God. They can bid at that point. For normal contract negotiations, we have a standard template. As part of the bidding process, the people who are bidding have the opportunity to take exceptions to that on the front end. So when I'm looking online to say, do I want to bid on this sidewalk bidder process, part of my response is going to, as a supplier, is going to be, I've looked at your standard contract terms, here are the exceptions that I want to take, so that we can look at that during the department can look at that during the evaluative process to see if those are kind of red lines for them. If they're not, then the buyer will develop the contract back and forth with the supplier, but it's all based on our contract. Now there are, just so that somebody doesn't come back and say, well, that's not always true. For some contracts, one thing I bought a couple of years ago was solar lease agreements, and that was we'd never done those before. And that was such a complicated process that we did not have anything that remotely spoke to that thing that we were buying. And so in that instance, we did use, we used their template, but we ran it through our process. So we still negotiated it, but we just didn't have anything remotely like that. We'd never done it before. No goes in hand.
All right, I'm done. I'll zip it for now.
You don't have to. Do you have any questions?
No, I mean, no.
Yeah, she got. So I have a couple before, and this is a generic question. I wanted to be sure of that. So my first question is that in a situation where, and some of the stuff I wanted to ask, you guys got it. In a situation where the purchasing department is recommending the vendor and the department is working with them. Do they have I'm trying to figure out if there's a bottleneck because they're not the one that did the original negotiation, or do you have like a contact person? Do you guys hand them off to, this is who you talk to? Is that one of the reasons why we're having issues? Is there a direct link between, is there a hands off from purchasing to the department for vendors that you identify?
Sure. So first thing I would say is that we don't identify vendors.
Okay.
And I think that's a common misconception, is that we're selecting these vendors for departments. That's just untrue. What happens in a solicitation is that it basically, just really high level, a department decides that they need to buy this thing. They submit a requisition to us, which tells us what they need. We take that requisition and turn it into a solicitation, which is the document we use to tell the market what we're looking to buy. When suppliers out in the ethos submit their offers, they submit them to us. We review, the buyer reviews them to make sure that they conform to form and function, that they're all legal. But then we don't evaluate those offers. There's a committee of people who are subject matter experts, because if I'm buying chemicals to treat the water, I don't have the faintest clue what that needs to entail. But Stephanie Belcher does, and Scott Potter does, and the people at Metro Water do. And so there's going to be a committee of subject matter experts who come in and who look at those offers and evaluate them. Now, the buyer's role in that is to take notes, to remind them what they can evaluate on, what they can't evaluate on, but those vendors are selected by the departments and their subject matter experts. So when it comes to the end of it, the people who are on that committee, who are from the department, who are subject matter experts, they are telling our buyers who they want to award to, and here's why. We then take that information back, make the award, and negotiate the contract. But even this is not something that we do on our own. We negotiate the contract in tandem with whoever the project manager is for that department. So if we're negotiating a project for, and I'm picking on water here just because we do a lot of water things, and we like to say they're one of our best customers. So water, we're negotiating that contract in tandem with whoever the subject matter expert is with water. There's nothing that we're putting in that contract that water didn't agree to on the front end. Now, that's not to say that there aren't things that, they may not like about the contract, but there are things that we all don't like about the contract.
So in every situation, the department got to have a say on whether they use that vendor or not, based on the committee's recommendation?
The department 100% decides. That is not, this idea that we select.
Yeah, that's not, and we'll get to that, because one of the allegations, we've had situations where department is like, we were told these are the set of people that we're recommending, and that's what they pick. So you're telling me that that's not always the case?
I would tell you that it is not ever the case. Now, so when it's a request for proposal where people are submitting offers and we're evaluating on a number of factors, price, approach, experience, etc., that is the department doing it. Now, somebody may submit an offer, and if the supplier didn't respond to the Equal Business Opportunity Program, they kind of said, forget you, I was going to use a different word there, but they said, forget you, and we're not going to respond to this part of your solicitation, our buyer will disqualify that on the front end, because if you don't meet the legal requirements, then yes, we will reject that solicitation if you just reject that. Also, if it's an ITB, invitations to bid, are items where, let's say you need nails, you need 9-inch nails. You don't need an offer on 9-inch nails. You need people to say, yes, I can provide 9-inch nails. And so then it's just about price. And so at that point, whoever's the low bid gets that. And the department may have preferred somebody else, but when it's something as simple as a 9-inch nail, that the low bidder is who's going to award to it, because by law we cannot negotiate invitations to bid, or ITBs. Those are just done on price.
And specifications.
So, but in a situation where, and I have a question on the existing contract and existing PO issue. So if it is an existing contract that another department is using, and I said I want to do this sidewalk, and you said we already have an existing contract, do departments have the option to say, I don't want to go with that contract, let's start my process again, hypothetically?
They can do that. It is up to the purchasing. Now they can. We don't work by dictate, because it's not super helpful for us. Like, we have to be partners with these departments, and we are partners with these departments. So we will come back to them and say, hey, if you want to get something quicker, like, we have this item that's on contract. Now they may come back to us and say, I don't want to use that, and here's why. And if they're able to articulate a reason, which they are 95% of the time, if they're able to say, listen, it's a different, your sidewalk vendor is really good at building sidewalks on dirt and in residential areas, but I need I have no idea if this is a real thing or not, but is a commercial vendor and he builds better or she builds better on rock, then we'll say, oh, okay, that makes sense, and we'll put it out to bid. Or if there's a question about price, sometimes, if you bid something at the height of the pandemic, the prices are probably way higher because inflation was super high at that point. And so if you can come to us and say, market research kind of shows me that this price has dropped, we have a couple of options. We can put it back out to bid, or we can go and try to renegotiate with the vendor and get a new price schedule on that. So there are multiple options.
So I think I'm glad we're having this conversation. And I remember that when we put this together, we're talking about it, one of the things that I kept saying is that this work group, what I think is going to come out of it is, one, will be education. Education for a lot of people, education for council members, but education for departments in terms of what are their rights, what are their responsibilities, what can they do and what can they not do. There could be a miscommunication here where, and it could be that the department knows, but the board that is with the department may not know. So again, communication here is going to be very critical. The other thing, of course, we also would like to look at performance improvement opportunities. Maybe this is the way we've been doing it and something that we need to do. So as part of the conversation that we're going to have And I will make you a list of what we decided at the last meeting as areas that sole source was on top of it, definitely. Cooperative agreement is a section on its own, and then this contracting is a section on its own. And then when we're looking at departments, I'm going to bring one of the people that says they told us we have to use this person, and I want them to come and talk about how that process works, and let's see where there's a breakdown in the system.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be very critical by the time we're done, so thank you. My other question is this. So in the situation wherein you have an existing contract and there's a PO with that contract, and then I want to do sidewalk again and I want to use the same contract, my understanding is that people can just use the same PO. Did I hear that right?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So a PO takes maybe 15 minutes to create and maybe a maximum of 48 hours for us to approve. Now it goes, like everything else, it goes through multiple levels of approval because obviously budgets has to look at that, other people have to look at that. But you will issue so there's a contract that's in place to build sidewalks. You need to build this section of sidewalk on Nolensville Pike where I live. You would issue a PO for that section of the sidewalk.
Okay.
If you need to go build a sidewalk in Whites Creek near where Michelle lives, then that would be a separate PO
Okay,
that you
so
would
that's, I want to correct that because I thought that's what you said, that we have a PO and they can just, I'm like, okay.
Now, sometimes a purchase order can there are certain things that we do buy via purchase order, right? Like if you're gonna buy a Zoom subscription, that's something you might buy via a purchase order. And so then anybody could use that purchase, could receive against that purchase order.
I think the other important thing to note too is that in some instances when you've issued that PO to come in and do sidewalk work, Nolensville Road, there's something that's encountered in the field that requires a notice of correction or a change. They would then go in and amend the existing purchase order to account for that additional work, but it's still related to that work.
Yes,
It would not be
The
using
new
the
one,
same
yes,
PO
yes.
for.
Yeah, I wanted to, for the sake of the viewing audience, make sure that
Yes.
I did not hear that correctly, and I want to make sure that we clarify because I didn't think that you could add another project on the PO that is already existing.
Yes, right. And what we can't do is we can't have a project to, like, let's say we have a contract to build a new courthouse. You can't then use that contract to build a new courthouse, to build a new police station, or to build a new library. There are contracts that are project specific.
Okay.
The contracts that we're talking about that are metro-wide that anybody can use are for services that multiple departments are
Already using.
Otherwise, that would be called scope creep, and that would be a bad thing. We wouldn't want to do that.
Okay. All right. So thank you for clarifying that. And then, so our contract is typically 5 years, whether it's sole source or not. At the end of the 5 years, do we go out and renegotiate or look for other vendors before renewing it if we need to extend it?
Yes, we do not.
I know some contract auto-renew. We've signed some that says you have 2 options to renew or something.
Yes.
Do you re-engage before that?
Yeah, so two things. It's not unusual for us to get a requisition that says we need to renew this contract. And my response to the department is, we don't renew contracts, not to pull full Michelle here, but we don't renew contracts. That's not a thing that we do. We have to rebid contracts. We have to put them back out into the market to receive offers. Now there are situations where the original contract, a lot of these are IT contracts, where it will say the contract term, instead of being 60 months, is 36 months, and with 2 optional 1-year renewals. And you might do that in a situation where it's a new vendor, where it's a service you're not sure you're going to need that long, or where it's a rapidly evolving marketplace, and so you want to leave yourself some leverage to go back out to the market during that time. So in those instances, it still is not an auto renewal. What happens is the contract, about a year before that current contract expires, we will start working with the department will kind of initiate conversations with us. We'll initiate conversations with the vendor, and we'll decide whether or not to execute that 1-year extension or renewal. Most of the renewals that you are seeing on council are probably extensions of contract beyond a 60-month term, because either the contract negotiation, generally, at least from my perspective, and the ones that I see and I review, are contracts where I was going to use an example, but I don't want to use that one anymore. They're contracts for an item that the contract has expired, the contract negotiation is ongoing, and so we need to extend the current contract beyond 60 months in order to cover that gap between the current contract expiring and the new contract being in place. That is my sense of what most of those that you see are going to be.
Okay. So when I'm looking at something that says that there's an option to renew,
Yes.
then there will always be rebid or a negotiation or something before that time happens.
It would depend on what the contract said, but there will be conversations with, the department will have to initiate that. It won't just happen. The department will have to say to us, we want to execute this 1-year renewal, and we will work with them to execute that 1-year renewal. It doesn't just happen on its own. If no action were taken, then that contract would be dead at the 3 years.
And may I? There's
Yes,
a
ma'am.
trigger. There's gonna be a trigger, and the contract will read it. It will either say it can be renewed by letter from the purchasing agent, and the purchasing agent can do that. It will say it can be renewed by amendment, which requires a formal amendment that has to be signed by the mayor, or it's gonna say council approval. So there's gonna be a trigger, there, and it's the department who's pulling that trigger, and then we, or they, used to be me, they formalize it using one of those, either amendment letter or council approval.
All right, well, thank you both very much. That's been very informative, and Ms. Evans is taking a lot of notes, and Ms. Darby is taking notes too. Also, the overview that you did, is there a presentation for it that can go in our shared drive, or it was just off the cuff?
No, it's a very cute PowerPoint that has some pictures of my dogs in it, and I'm really looking forward to giving it. I don't know that it would make a lot of sense out of context of my witty commentary, but I'm happy to provide it if it's helpful. We will be giving it on the 7th too, so I invite you.
Oh, that's the big one.
Yes, that's the big one.
No, the big one.
This is off the cuff, but I can give you what I wrote down.
No. The big one, we will still want you to present it here. Part of the reason is that even in your conversation, I already know there are 2 or 3 things that's changed from the way you used to do it. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think some of the issues that we've run into over the years could also have been, mitigated with these new processes or not. And so I want us to be able to talk in terms of how we used to do it, how we do it now, and things like that. But I know that there's been changes. So what we will also do is, I'm hoping that somebody from procurement will be at these meetings, especially when we are bringing folks to interview or talk to, so that way we can be addressing them as we go along. So our goal is, we've got this overview, we'll decide on who we want to talk to, we'll bring them to come and talk about all the problems with procurement that we hear about, so you all can hear about it, and then we can talk about how do we go from here. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. So the next thing we want to do is to decide which department we want to talk to, and so there is a report. Ms. Darby has been kind enough to put it in our share folder, which is called the Key Performance Indicators for Procurement. This is something that they have available every year. So what I've asked them to do is pull the last 3 years for us. So we have 24, 23, and 22. You should have it on your desk. And so if we can just take a look at it, the report has department in terms of the numbers of contracts and procurement that they do, and then it also has the amount. So we talk about looking at department that does a lot of, that are always in front of procurement, have 1 or 2 from there, and then maybe also have people that high dollar as well, a good mix. I know I put animal control down because there's already issue. They may not have a lot of procurement stuff, but they got issue now, so we use them as our thing. So if we want to go through that, so it looks as if dollar-wise, if I can see, HR.
Yeah, human resources, yeah.
And then, what is Metro-wide?
What is Metro-wide?
Yes.
A Metro-wide contract is just a contract that any department can use. It covers all of Metro.
Okay.
That's our default is to go Metro-wide unless it is specific. Like you see, juvenile court's got one for like 24 million. Obviously, that's to build the new juvenile campus, and so that's project specific. But our default is to go metro-wide,
Okay.
because then that allows anybody to issue a PO and use it.
Can you, as far as like talking about MAC, I had already talked to Dr. Black
When you say
about.
MAC, I always think about Metro Action Commission.
And, getting MAC.
Different MAC.
But Dr. Black had said she would be happy to come for health,
Okay.
and that would of course encompass, MAC.
Okay, all right. So we got MAC on our list. I want the library, because there was a conversation about the library looking for a director, and that would process and what happened, and a part of it came back as procurement. So, and this is for services, not goods, so I think it would be good
Where's
to
that
have.
at? Oh,
They're not on the
library, I see
list.
it.
The
Oh,
public
yeah, I see it.
library,
I
yes,
see it.
yes, and
Okay.
they have about 16 million,
Yeah.
which is not a small amount. Where do I see the total number? If I'm looking at this report, I see, is that the total contracts? Or
Are you-
do I have to add my contract to my cooperative, to my emergency, to see the total number of,
So those are procured, and that's an important thing to understand too, is that we do a lot more than contracts. If you're looking for a total number, so emergencies would be emergency contracts, and those contracts have to be negotiated, cooperative contracts,
Okay.
purchase orders that we had to set up. So you would add, if you were to add the emergencies, the cooperatives, and then, well, actually, if you look at the end, that's gonna give you the, under contracts, that's gonna roll that number together.
so on the contract is where you're gonna have the sum of everything? Or is there another column for the sum of everything is what I'm looking for? Or do I have to decide that, okay, these are mine, and maybe that's what we have to do. For sole source, we're gonna use this department. For cooperative, we're gonna talk to this department, and then for contract, we'll talk to this department. That might be a good way to do that.
The contracts would be, the contracts number, the contracts field is inclusive of all of the sourcing activities. So that
Okay,
would be
good,
emergency
good. Okay,
contracts,
okay, okay.
cooperative contracts, sorry, it's a,
Okay, that's what I was trying.
I do apologize.
You know what threw me off? What threw me off is the sole source less than 25K is already 33, and so then the contract is 30. So that's why I'm like, okay, what am I missing here?
And the sole source less than 250K, that just means those are sole sources that didn't come to
That it come to procurement.
or no, they didn't come to you all. Sole sources, all sole sources come to us,
Okay.
but sole sources above $250,000 come to you all for approval at the end.
All right. So in terms of transaction, general services should be one.
Yeah, I was
Dollar
thinking,
and
I was thinking general.
yeah, general service should be a big
Human
one.
resources, NDOT,
And okay, we're just going with dollar value there. Let's look at numbers too. Does that make sense? And that is the higher one too. Now that you talk about it, they have 12.
NDOT,
Let's
water,
do-
and general services are our top three in terms of activity.
water was just so big. I mean,
Mm-hmm. And it is dollar and so how many department do we want to interview? I guess that would be the question.
I don't know, 3, 4?
I have
many-
6 marked.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
how many meetings are you gonna try to coordinate that?
Maybe 2 or
Oh,
3.
okay. And that's all we'd be doing during that time period, is
Yeah,
talking
just
to
maybe
them?
just talking to them.
Yeah, then maybe we do 3 and 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. But I want it to be not just the high dollar.
Yeah.
I want it to be a good
Mixture.
mix. So what do you have?
Well, you had said you wanted public library, so I marked public library, NDOT, Metro-wide, human
Who are
resources.
you gonna interview for Metro-wide?
Huh?
It's for everybody. You can't pick
Yeah,
Metro-wide.
I guess we, take that one off then.
They will be the Metro-wide.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's true.
And you mark health.
And
I did mark health.
Health?
Because
okay.
health is smaller, but
Yeah,
Okay, you want health?
yeah, I
Okay.
marked health.
Okay.
Want another small one, just to,
We got animal care.
well, that's under health though.
Oh, that is under health, okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay, that's good. All right, parks?
Parks, okay, yeah, that's fine. Parks and Recreation, okay. So we have,
And those are all big ones now.
so General Services, Health, Metro-wide, we were taking off. Human Resources,
What do human resources back?
All of your benefits, health insurance, dental insurance, supplemental life,
Yeah, I don't know if
I
you
mean-
wanna,
it's up to you.
they're huge contracts usually, but, and very nuanced to
Yeah.
human resources.
and
I
that
will say
goes
that-
through the, also go through the, civil service and all of that
Oh,
stuff,
yeah.
yeah, so, I don't know if we need to be looking
Take
at.
that one,
benef-
we'll take,
yeah, I
we'll
won't
pass
know
that
what
one right
to-
now.
You know, unless they have an issue and they think their stuff get bottleneck,
Well, I
I don't
mean,
know.
what departments have talked about issues, but, I mean, that's the ones we probably need to,
Yeah,
I mean, what, besides,
yeah, I think I
Animal
would take
control?
HR off if it's mostly benefits, because I wouldn't even know.
Yeah, I will say Metro Action Commission are one of the smaller departments, and they had a spot on the Procurement Standards Board, so they probably have more insight into the process than most.
That's a good point.
And they also deal with a lot of shared projects, state funding, federal funding.
so you think that'll be a good one?
Okay.
So General Services, Health, Metro Action, are we doing NDOT or no?
How many do we have?
With NDOT, Parks and Recreation, and Public Library, that'll be 6. That's 6.
That's
Want to
probably
do those
fine.
6?
Fine by me.
Fine by me.
That's all about
As
me.
long as health is on there, I'm good.
Only because that's where the dog pound
I'm
is.
surprised that, I'm surprised that police is not a lot. MMPD. Let's see, in terms of dollar value, only have 7 million. This is interesting. Don't we do, now, okay, so one thing that I also want to make sure is, as we're looking at this, I'm also looking at the ones that does a lot of sole source and a lot of, so the police does a lot of sole source. Well, it's the police. Health does a lot of sole source too. Okay, general services. Okay, we've covered that type of agreement.
Because so does the Public Library.
Okay, so I want to make sure that we're covering.
The
What is
public
so
library one
grand?
might be a bit misleading. Essentially, we have a situation where the library is making purchases outside of the purchasing process for the better part of the decade. And so we had to bring them into the process. And so they had a lot of sole sources, because if we didn't give them a sole source, there would have been no library services.
And emergency.
And emergency. So their numbers are definitely inflated for '24 in that.
So tell me about the emergency.
Wait, one. The emergency. So an emergency is if there's an issue, and it can happen in 2 ways. There's an issue that creates a life, health, safety,
Okay.
and so we need to move quickly. Generally, in those situations, we still try to do something like a quick bid. Like if you're doing debris removal after a tornado, you might do a 3-day bid. We try everything it's a last ditch thing. We try everything we can to solicit competition. An emergency can also be to extend a contract if a contract has expired and we can't extend it because the contract doesn't exist anymore. We can put an emergency contract in place to handle it. Or if there's an issue, a pipe burst, and which we have contracts to cover that, but something happens over the weekend at a department and they have to issue a purchase order to do that, then we would come back on the back end and negotiate that. So it rises from a variety of circumstances.
I was just looking at it because library has emergency. I can understand the police, the sheriff, but library was on there.
And that's, sorry.
It's functioning of government. That is another one of those elements. It's like if there's going to be a threat to some level of functioning of government, some government service, then the procurement regulations allow for the use of emergencies for that.
And again, once we had discovered that basically they were operating outside of the procurement system, we granted them emergencies fairly. We got them into emergency contracts quickly because obviously we can't be without the library. That's an essential government function.
Okay.
In my view.
I want to talk to ITS. We get a lot of computer stuff, a lot that is sole source. That's one that we get a whole lot of. I'm really interested
Yeah, okay,
in what they do. So can we
Add
add
them to the list.
Yeah, please add them to the list.
And you're right, we've signed a lot of
It's
some sorts of
a
things.
lot from ITS. Okay, all right. I think that would that would take care of a whole lot of department here, and I think that would be a start. And if somebody doesn't, if we feel that we need more, we'll get into it. Okay. So recap. What we got?
Okay, recap. We have general
You taking
services,
notes?
health,
Metro
IT.
Action. Okay.
IT.
Okay.
Metro Action, NDOT, Parks and Recreation, and Public Library.
Okay. All righty. I think if we look in terms of amount and in terms of transactions, I think those cover a whole lot. And I think your animal care would be the one of, animal care is part of health.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, yep, okay, that's good.
I have a question. Can I ask one question?
No?
No.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a written process? He said it took 120 days to a year to get the contract. Is there a written process anywhere that I can read?
Mm-hmm.
Where's that at?
Yes, ma'am, I can probably get that for you.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that if you can get us, I think Miss Annie Zeitlin started compiling some things for me, all of the codes and all of the ordinances, everything that has to do with procurement. We're going to try and put all of that in the shared drive, and any process that you want to give us, so that will be part of something that you all should be looking at.
Yeah, right.
As we have our conversation. I don't want us to go too much over, so the next thing we want to do really quickly is to try and set a date for the next meeting. Do you all want to do that now? Do you just want us to do if you do with everybody else?
I'm sorry, what would, you want us to do a what?
I do the poll.
Oh, but are these your proposed dates?
These are the dates, yes, so I want to see what works for everyone. I would rather we do November instead of December, because I start getting to the holidays, but we can do that. And then we need to pick 2 days to talk to departments. My preference, honestly, would be to do the departments back to back instead of with a long time and then, so just do them not back to back with each other, if that's okay with everybody. So if we're looking at November, Miss Darby gave us November 13.
That's the, start of National League of Cities. So I know that, I'm going to that, and so that, I don't know if anybody else is.
And that ends?
It starts on the 13th.
That's on the 13th.
It's the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Is that weekend? Okay.
But I'm good for the 20th.
November 20th?
I'm good with that.
November 20th?
I'd rather have that than the day before Thanksgiving.
No, I don't think that.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna get any departments in here that day before.
No, nobody's gonna be here.
Oh,
So, but if we do the.
You might not get any council people in here.
What day is the 20th?
20th is a Wednesday.
Wednesday. Are you able to do Wednesday, Thursday?
20th and 21st?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I probably
Okay.
could.
What?
Let me look at the calendar. No,
Of November?
I don't. Yes.
The 21st is Thanksgiving, isn't it?
No.
No, it's the 28th.
It's later this year.
And look at me, I'm not even looking at my calendar, so when I get,
I'm at home, I can't come.
shouldn't I be looking at my calendar? That's a fact.
I'll schedule the 20th and the 21st, and the 21st tentatively. The 20th, we definitely
Good.
we have availability and no
Okay.
conflicts, but the 21st, I'm not sure if we have conflicts with other meetings or,
We came first.
well, the 21st being a Thursday, is that a planning commission meeting date? I don't know.
I don't know either.
And we usually try to not
do.
schedule,
Okay.
especially with Councilmember Gamble being on the.
Being on both, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do the 20th and then try to do, what is 27th? So that is another Wednesday, so, and then maybe do the Monday or Tuesday,
I don't know, I think the week of Thanksgiving would probably be out for
all
everybody.
I think we're gonna have a hard time getting people
Yeah.
lined up to come in and.
Okay, then let's try the 20th or the 21st and see
Can I
how
look
that
at
works.
the 19th also, which is
Yeah.
a Tuesday?
I thought that's
Okay.
council meeting. You said
Oh, it
20th is
is.
a day after council.
That's true.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, help us look at
Yeah,
the
let's not
21st
schedule
or
it.
22nd. Then 22nd will be a Friday. You don't want to do that either. So let's look at the 21st. Hope it works.
Okay.
And then we go from there. But the 20th, we know definitely that we're doing. Do we want to decide on who we want for 28th so that at least they can get the invitation out, or?
I think just
I
leave
mean,
that up to
are we
them.
gonna be inviting for them to pick a date? Or are we gonna be commanding that they attend? I mean, it would seem like it would be probably easier to give them some options.
Yeah, I think if we have, I think for scheduling purposes, we reach out to all the department heads, see who they, recommend to send and say, these are our 2 dates and we've got, which ones are you available? And then we will schedule them on those dates.
Okay.
So if there's.
We'll leave it in your capable hands, Ms. Darby.
Okay.
That works. Any other?
Can I-
No? Yes, ma'am.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
if the 21st is not available for whatever reason, can we look at the December 4th, just so we can go ahead and get things scheduled as opposed to?
Oh, that is true.
That's
Yeah,
fine for
we
me.
can
Is it
do that.
back up? Okay.
Yeah, let's
Can
do
we do the
that.
5th?
What day is the 5th?
It's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday. I can look at it.
That's just my mom's birthday and
Okay.
we'll be doing something, she's 82, she'll be turning 83 and, I mean,
Like, I'm saying yes to everything because I'm not even looking at my calendar. And I'm gonna be like, Miss Darby.
Okay, so I'll look at hopefully the 21st is available, we can knock it out on those 2 days. If not, I'm gonna look at December 4th and the 5th as backup dates.
Okay.
Okay, that
We'll
works.
let you know.
That works.
pretty early too, we probably wouldn't be eating until after that. 'Cause 5 o'clock's pretty early, I mean.
Not for staff, though.
No, I'm talking about for like a birthday party, we would be
Oh,
going
we'll
after
be
that.
done. Okay,
we would
yeah,
not be-
yeah, okay.
I could still make a birthday
All right,
party.
well,
Yeah.
thank you, Mr. Kelly, Miss Lane, Miss everybody. Miss Beauty Brooks, Miss Darby for being here, thank you both.
Forgetting everybody's name.
Yes, so the next meeting will be, we'll adjourn until November 20th.
Sounds good.
All right,
I
thank you.
sent you an email on what I got from General Services, did you see